on by Sean Spicer to not being called on by the president. So I do consider that somewhat of a promotion, really, if I look at that. Let me try to see if I can walk downstairs without falling. This will be enjoyable for everybody. By the way, if I do fall, I love my wife very much. So let me talk about this. So it's very, very interesting once again. It was very interesting to be in the middle of the hostile fake press. Very, very interesting. For one thing, if you watch the press conference, there were about a zillion questions on Russia. And the question I would have asked, had I been called on, was that there's been absolutely no conclusive proof that Russia was behind the DNC or DCC hacks that have been that's been come out publicly. In fact, the main information that connects Russia to the DNC and DCCC hacks comes from CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was a group that was hired by the Democrats and working for the Democratic Party. Let's be clear on that. That's the main source of the information, including the information that the IC, the intelligence community, but we like to call it IC because it sounds cooler. Also, if you say it fast, it sounds like icy. That's a true fact. But the information that we have from the IC actually comes from this group CrowdStrike. So my question, by the way, I wouldn't have made that joke about IC had the president called on me. I'm just going to point that out so you'll know I'm a professional. But the question I had there was, without revealing anything that would jeopardize national security, could the president say that he's heard anything that conclusively connects Russia to the hacks? Because this is the sort of underlying premise that has been repeated by the media over and over and over again. And yet there's absolutely no conclusive proof for it. And I've interviewed multiple tech people on this, and I was probably the only reporter in that room who actually dealt with Guccifer 2, the person who we know was behind the hacks, that everyone admits was behind the hacks. When I dealt with Guccifer 2, I had no evidence whatsoever that Guccifer 2, no reason to think it was a foreign government. It seemed like a weird thing for a foreign government to do. My follow-up would have been about the labor secretary and whether, but it was you couldn't get that in because everybody was talking about Russia. So once again, it was fascinating. It was great to be in a press conference. Just being in a press conference here was very, very interesting. And I was that close to being called on. I mean, they called on Major Garrett, who was in front of me. They called in a couple people around me. Jim Acosta from CNN was right in front of me, forward and to the left there. And no, I didn't push him over when he was standing on a giant apple box. I didn't do that. No, don't even suggest it because that would be unprofessional, and I'm nothing if not professional. Hey, speaking of which, I'm going to be hosting Breitbart News daily tomorrow on Sirius XM. I should point that out. I hosted today 3 hours, 6 to 9. I'll be on tomorrow, 6 to 9. Today's show was great. We had John Bolton, former UN ambassador. We had Sebastian Gorka, dude who's been lied about and smeared in the media recently. We had Sebastian Gorka on. We had my friend Albert Guillory, the first black Republican elected to the Louisiana State Senate since Reconstruction. Hang on one second. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't leave my wallet in the White House. Hang on. I just checked. I did that little pat-down thing people do. By the way, I'm sure I'm the only reporter here who was worried about their wallet being left in the White House. Then I'd have to go back and get it. I did see as people entered. I did see Steve Bannon. Did see Steve Miller. They didn't see me because they probably weren't looking over the press, and I didn't go like, "Hey, Steve. Hey, Steve." I didn't do that. I'm not sure since he started dressing nicely if he's allowed to talk to me. I'm not really sure of that. But anyway, fascinating atmosphere. Once again, I think the president's statements, whoever wrote that, and I got to believe that Bannon and Miller were behind it in some way. Let me tell you a saying Andrew Breitbart used to say. Andrew Breitbart was asked by a presidential candidate in 2012 for advice. And I'm not going to mention who it is, but he told that presidential candidate, I'll tell who it is. It was Newt Gingrich. So Newt Gingrich asked Andrew Breitbart in 2012 if he'd seen the debates and if he had any advice. And Andrew told him, he said, well, going after the media always works for me. And so you'll remember in 2012, Newt Gingrich started going after the media, and it worked real well for Newt. I mean, it didn't get him the nomination. Too bad, because he probably would have done better than Romney. But that was Andrew's theory. And, you know, once again, I think you saw that with President Trump. He went after the media squarely over and over and over again. And then they proceeded to prove him completely right. He said over and over and over again, the Russia thing is a bluff. It's a ruse. So I'm going to make the same suggestion to the president that I've made to Sean Spicer. I made it on Breitbart News Sunday. Well, by the way, if you have not done so, retweet this bad boy. But I'm going to make the same suggestion I made on Breitbart News Sunday. Stop calling on these people. Just stop calling on them. You give them a forum for their nonsense. That's what's going on. So why do that? I honestly think, and for whoever the bozo was who asked the question about the First Amendment, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Basically saying, if you don't, here, I'll do it. Ready? I'll do what he said. Watch, ready? Here I go. I'm gonna do it in my Bill Murray voice from Caddyshack. Mr. President, by not calling on me, do you think you're violating the First Amendment? Right? I mean, because that's what these morons are doing, basically. They're saying, well, if you don't take the questions we decide, you're violating the First Amendment, like the president doesn't have First Amendment rights or something like that.